Adventures of the Arrowverse, episode 7. We're going to be talking about Arrow season 7. If you enjoy, share it, like it, subscribe, and keep up to date on the weekly episodes. So let's get right into it. Arrow season 7, which was the actual last, full-on season. Season 8 was only 10 episodes, and that being the final season of Arrow ever. But this is the last season of Arrow where we had 20 or so episodes. It was 22 total, but nonetheless, it was the last season for 20 plus episodes for a regular season. And I think it made the season better with it being 21 episodes of storyline, because remember, one of them was a crossover, and then we had an episode cut off, making it 22 episodes a season. They did that for, I think, Flash and Supergirl too. I don't remember if they did for Supergirl that year, but I know they did it for Flash season 5, and then they went down after season 6. But anyways, I do think with the first story arc, the season's basically split up into 2 to 3 story arcs. You can argue 3. The first one was all about Oliver being in prison, with Diaz still on the loose, the FBI not really holding up their end of the bargain, which was Oliver going to prison while the FBI stays in Star City to stop Diaz. It's been, I think it was 5 months in between 701 and 623 when Oliver went to prison. We know he's at Slab side with pretty much not everyone, but a majority of the people he's put away. One of the people that showed up were Stardust, Brick, and Bronze Tiger, and I think those were the main 3 that kept reoccurring throughout the story arc. And then they all got killed, or 2 of the 3 got killed. Bronze Tiger ended up joining Team Arrow, or at least helping Team Arrow at the end of the season, which I think I love. Bronze Tiger, I can't remember his name for the life of me, but you know what I mean. And, you know, it's interesting to see Oliver being a person with people he's put away, because everyone is, scared of him a little bit. Because he's a green freaking Arrow. You know, if the Green Arrow was, in prison and you were there too, yeah, you wouldn't be, you wouldn't be trying to kill him or anything. Or attack him even, because you know what you can do, but obviously there's people in that prison who were bought out by Diaz, and they did actually try to attack him, but Oliver kind of kicked their butts, besides one person, and then he ended up kicking his butt later, so, but seeing Oliver in prison and actually, having a whole story arc on it, and the rest of the season after the prison stuff, with it being based on what Oliver learned in prison, learning due process and all that, and who really should be put away and who shouldn't be, the cycle of violence, which is a big thing throughout the back half of the season, was a really good writing throughout the entire thing, for me, I think. Like I said, we were dealing with Diaz, and in the back half, we were dealing, and, Diaz and the Longbow Hunters, which we got introduced finally after teasing them in season 6. And one was a silencer, one had a really sharp shield, and I think there was another one who had darts or something. I don't remember exactly what, but yeah, those who were working with Diaz, and then Diaz got some drug to make him powerful. And he broke into prison, fought Oliver. It's a really good fight scene in the end of the story arc there. We were dealing with the Star City Slayer, which we didn't know at the time was Star City Slayer. But he ended up getting out when Oliver got out in the prison break by killing Brick. And again, it was that finale for the prison where Stardust died too. And then Bronze Tiger got out a couple months after helping Oliver, because he did turn a leaf over. And then we were getting into Oliver being out of prison, him becoming the Green Arrow again, and the entire city really not siding with him being the Green Arrow. Or at least the majority of it, because there's already a new Green Arrow running out there. Since Oliver was in prison, there's been this person who we later found out was Oliver's half-sister, related to Robert Queen, not Moira, Robert, dressed up as the Green Arrow, which we found out later on was for purposes for the Ninth Circle, which was the second, like, big bad kind of for the season, which is why I say 2 or 3, because really, the second big bad of this story arc of season 7 was Emiko, and then the third was Dante. Although you could Dante slash the Ninth Circle. Dante ended up dying before Emiko was really done being the big bad. But you could really heavily argue that the big bad was the Ninth Circle in general. But before that, we were also dealing with Emiko long before. And she was around way longer than anyone got interested in Ninth Circle. And everyone always considered her sort of the bad person in the situation throughout the season. So that's why I'm saying 2 or 3. Emiko is obviously one of the big bads this season. The third, again, you can argue is the Ninth Circle. Up to you. But Diaz, Emiko, 100% big bads of the season. And we see when Oliver, gets out of prison, he's getting back into it right away. Being unmasked, not wearing a mask anymore, not wearing the hood, just having his gear on and that. And seeing that, and they were able to only do it because Stephen Amell. Whenever I watch this season, all I think about, they would not have been able to do that if Steven didn't do his own stunts. Because if he didn't work his butt off for it either. Because you can, if it wasn't Steven, if he needed a stunt double to do, this entire show, they wouldn't have been able to pull that off. Because you probably wouldn't have known exactly, but you could tell when there's a stunt double. You can tell for Laurel. I mean, there were some scenes this season where she had a stunt double, and you could tell right away that was a stunt double. It didn't ruin the scene, but it was okay, that's not Katie Cassidy, that's whoever her stunt double is. You could tell in past seasons, especially season 3, and that big fight scene with Team Arrow, and then Roz and Oliver come out when they're trying to stop the virus. You could tell Malcolm had a stunt double out there, Laurel had a stunt double out there. I don't think John did, or David Ramsey did. I don't think he's ever had a stunt double on set. I could be wrong now, but that's always something that this show didn't do so well on. Was if there was a stunt double replacing someone that you could visibly see their face, you could tell it wasn't them. And like I said, season 3, towards the ending of it, you could tell Malcolm had a stunt double in one of these fight scenes, and it was just awful. I was like, come on, guys. You should really do better than that. But at least be able to, make it look like Malcolm and not a completely different person, really. But, I mean, it's not super obvious. And again, it didn't ruin the scene or anything, but knowing that's not, the actual Malcolm is someone else, okay. But, again, they wouldn't have pulled off being able to have Oliver come out, being the Green Arrow, fully unmasked, not wearing a hood or mask or anything, besides the suit, the gear, and that. If Steven didn't put in the work, if he hadn't spent the past 7 years on the show prior to season 7, working his butt off, literally being in the suit, doing every single possible stunt he can, which is all of it, even when he was injured. One of the moments during season 7 in the prison scene, I don't remember what it was. I think it was when Oliver got stabbed, I think it was, when he stabbed himself to get that prisoner guard out. He actually had a knee injury, or a leg injury, I think it was. And whenever you saw him the next episode limping, it was because he was injured. I'm pretty sure that's what that was. I had no idea, and I was like, holy Steven's amazing. Which I think we all knew that prior, but still, it's pretty cool to hear that. And he was doing all the stunts in the episode, jumping up the balcony and all that. So knowing how much work Steven puts in to the show, again, they wouldn't have been able to pull any of this off without Steven, obviously, but doing all these scenes with Green Arrow unmasked, that's all because Steven's amazing as hell. And they could do that with Barry, but, it'd also be chaotic because he's running at super speed and, he needs a mask on, otherwise it's going to be a mess. But, I mean, it was really cool to see Oliver working with the police, which is the only way he wouldn't be able to go to prison. Because of the anti-vigilante law, which was in place, but then got disbanded because of the new vigilante task force for the Central City Police Department made by Dinah, the captain of CCPD? No, SCPD now. Black Siren, aka Laurel Lance, is the DA, and she's obviously helping, Black Canary and the Team Arrow and all that. And she wasn't like a villain this season necessarily. I mean, she did do some bad things, and there was one episode where she really did turn bad in the Lost Canary episode where they brought Sarah back, and she couldn't fully participate in everything because she was a vigilante. She wasn't pardoned by SCPD, but Dinah let it go to stop Laurel. And then she turned over and became the Black Canary. Instead of being Black Siren, she became the Black Canary, which then carried over into the finale of season 7 and season 8. A majority, I think all of season 8, we saw Laurel being the Black Canary, maybe besides Crisis. No, she wasn't in Crisis. That would have been 1 out of the 10 episodes she wasn't in. Otherwise, all of them, I'm pretty sure we had Laurel Lance being the Black Canary, or 2 Laurel, being the Black Canary. And so, and also on Earth Prime now, she's the Black Canary, because she was brought over, so, by Oliver, who sacrificed himself in Crisis, obviously, which we'll talk about when that crossover comes up, but, spoiler alert, a little late now, if you haven't seen it by now, I don't know what to tell you. If you don't know that Oliver dies at the end of the series, like, I don't know what to tell you. You should have known that long ago. If you're like watching this as like seasons go on, like, come on. Like, if you watch a season, you know Oliver's gonna die in Crisis. It's not that big of a deal to say, oh, and 722 Minor came in and said Oliver's gonna die, and then next season's 10 episodes. Yeah, he's dead. I don't like, he's gonna die. Like, we all know that. If you've seen Crisis, you know that. Even if you didn't watch Crisis, like I said, you should know that based on 7022. 7022? No, not 70. Season 70, everyone of Arrow. Jesus. I don't think Arrow can make it 70 years. It'd be weird, honestly, because how could they? Yeah, it won't work out well. 70 years. But 722 was when we found out Oliver would die. Or at least, how. Because of Crisis. But we were also dealing with the future flash forwards. Now, we went an entire year without any really flashbacks. We had like 1 or 2 flashbacks season 6, on top of 5 years of flashbacks to season 1 through 5. At least show-wise, I didn't really care for the flash forwards. I wasn't like, oh, I didn't like them, because it's not that I didn't like them, it's not that I didn't, hate him or anything. I didn't really care for him. Kat McNamara, who plays Mia Smoke, was amazing. I always loved Kat McNamara on Arrow. And whenever she comes back, like she came back for Armageddon, I loved her on Flash. I wish we do get more of her, and obviously we would have if Green on the Canaries happened. And we do get more of her in season 8 of Arrow, which I'm glad we do. Which we'll talk about next week for episode 8 of the podcast, Arrow season 8 episode. But then we had future Dinah, future Rory, which was surprising to see. I'm glad they got Colton Hayes back for that. Future Renee, who was evil, kind of-ish. She didn't really know what was going on fully, I guess. Felicity was resumed dead. Obviously, that didn't pan out. Oliver is 100% dead at this point because he died in 2019, which we knew that prior. Mia being Oliver and Felicity's child that was born, obviously. And then we have future William. The actor who played William really was, I think, the perfect kind of casting. I think Kat McNamara was too for Mia, because she did resemble a lot of Oliver and also looked not exactly like Felicity, but you could tell she was Oliver and Felicity's daughter, without even knowing that. You could tell she was their daughter. Just how she was fighting, how she was moving, how she, kind of looked, at least with her hair and from time to time. And her face, you can kind of tell it was Felicity and Oliver's daughter in some ways. But again, especially the fighting skills, I mean, you can kind of tell. And it was the entire story arc for the future flashbacks were all leading up to Mia basically becoming a hero, becoming like her father, the Green Arrow. But there was a whole story arc where she hated vigilantes, where she hated her father because vigilantes were criminals who destroyed the city, apparently, or supposedly they did. They just got set up for it, apparently. But, you know, Alvin and Felicity wanted a future for their daughter and William where it wasn't that dangerous and it was completely dark. I mean, it's probably the darkest RC's been in a long time. And it's, of course, when Mia shows up, you know, whenever, like, Oliver shows up, there's trouble. Whenever Mia shows up, there's trouble. So you can tell that 100% that was Oliver's daughter then. But nonetheless, like, the entire story of Mia becoming a hero, becoming the Green Arrow, throughout this season and next season, I think we can all agree, if Green on the Canaries did happen, it would have been really, really, really cool to see. I wanted Green on the Canaries, and we'll talk about this, I think, in 2 weeks. I'm going to move some episodes back that I planned. I'm still debating whether I want to do this or not. I might just do an entire podcast episode talking about Green on the Canaries, that one episode we had, because I have a lot to say about it, and I can't just cover it in, like, the season 8 episode of the podcast, so I might do that. I'm still debating it, though. We'll see. But it's something I'm definitely considering doing, is just talking about 809, which is the backdoor pilot for Green on Canaries if it ever got picked up, which it didn't. CW canceled it. But Ken McNamara was just amazing. I mean, some of the lines could have been better. You know, the writing could have been better a little bit here and there. But, I mean, it felt like a future OG Arrow. Like, it had its own theme to it and its own story going. It really did work out. And like I said, I didn't really care for it, but I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm also not saying I didn't hate it. I was, like, neutral with it. I had things I liked, things I didn't. And the things I didn't like mainly came from the writing, that some lines weren't that good or didn't fit really to me when I was watching it, at least. Could have been better, but, you know, I still like the casting, and I think Green on Canaries could have really, truly been a big hit for DC TV, especially how the shows are now. I mean, you look at Stargirl, Supergirl, Lois, Flash Season 8, I mean, all these shows are doing really damn well. Imagine if Green on Canaries did get picked up. I mean, this would be an amazing year if that show was picked up. It's still an amazing year nonetheless, but, I mean, having a Arrow spinoff, I mean, that would have made a lot of viewership for the CW. Even if the show wasn't that great, it still would have done very, very well, because it wouldn't have had Legends of Tomorrow writers on it, so, Legends of Tomorrow is just a big disappointment, but we'll talk about that when we get there in, like, 2 months. But the point is, I think that Arrow Season 7 wasn't the worst season, but it wasn't the best. And I know I said that for Season 6, but Season 7 is better. I can heavily argue Season 7 is better than Season 6, 4, and 3. Again, Season 5, 1, and 2, I think are one of the best seasons on the show. Season 7 was, again, neutral about it, but it was better than Season 6. By far better than Season 6. I wouldn't say it was better than Season 2 or 1. Definitely not 5. Season 7 was 100% worse than Season 5. But again, it was better than Season 6. That's how I see it, and yeah. So let's get into... Oh, and we also had Roy coming back to the present day, and we found out that he died when Thea and Nyssa and him were going to South Lazarus Pits. He apparently died, came back, had a bloodlust problem, and just with the future with Roy being found on the NU by William, I mean, it was really amazing to see. And, obviously, I like Roy on this show. If you don't like Roy on Arrow, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you need help. Like, seriously, Roy is an amazing character on Arrow. And no matter what Colton Hayes gets, he always performs at 100% with Roy. And he does an amazing job with it. So I just wanted to bring up Roy real quick, but yeah. So let's get into the podcast response by you guys. If you want to be a part of this, be sure to join the Arrowverse Discord server in the description down below, just so everyone is aware. I did make a new Arrowverse Discord server that went up earlier this week. I don't believe it was up prior to episode 6. I don't think it was. Which means I released it this week. Or at least late last week, I think it was. I released it around the 15th of March, which would have been after last episode of the podcast. So make sure you join the new Discord server, and you will be able to participate in the podcast by responding to community response. It has its own podcast category now in the server. So I'm going to be reading off some of your comments. Again, I don't read off names because I'm not going to violate people like that. I generally ask if I do. That's not how I do things. And by not how I do things, I mean, if I wanted to say your name, I would ask first. I wouldn't just, here's this guy's name, here's what he said. No, because if people disagree, it'll be a whole thing, and, people would attack you. So this is a place, this podcast is made specifically to where people can share their opinions, get it said on the podcast, and no hate being said. That is the point of it. So just keep that in mind. Honestly, when we get into Flash, I think Flash would be the arc of the podcast where we're going to get a lot of people coming in and they'll have a lot of opinions to say and a lot of disagreements with me and with a lot of people who are going to be sharing their opinions. It'll be a mess, I think, but hopefully it will be controlled in a way and not a whole wildfire. That's my hope, although I could be completely wrong and it just wouldn't pick up at all, but, And, so we'll see where that one goes. But, anyways, here's the community response over Arrow Season 7. One person said, "This is a fairly unpopular opinion, but I never really thought Diaz was a good villain. I just didn't see him as very intimidating, unlike Malcolm, Slade, and Ra's al Ghul, Dark, and Prometheus." I loved Diaz as a villain. I wouldn't say he was as threatening as Prometheus or Slade or Merlin, but to me, he was definitely, very intimidating with being able to control the entire city. I mean, none of the past villains have been able to do that. I mean, Diaz controlled the entire city. He had everything wired to the books, and he did it all under Oliver's watch. I mean, and it's only because Oliver couldn't stop him right away, and Dick couldn't either when he was the Green Arrow. I think it's set up perfectly, but I do agree it wasn't, that good, compared to, Prometheus or Slade or Merlin. Someone else agreed, with the last comment, the last opinion. This other person also said he hasn't watched the entire season yet, but not gonna lie, the prison arc was a roller coaster. Would not recommend going to prison yourself, though, to try to have an experience like that. I wouldn't want to go to prison either to have an experience like that. But then again, remember, they thought Oliver was a criminal. I mean, he was, at least in the entire world, because while he was the Green Arrow, and he saved hundreds of thousands of lives, or probably billions at that point, I mean, he also caused several crimes. He broke the vigilante law. He literally made himself a criminal a year ago prior to that point, in season 5, and the entire city wanted a Green Arrow to go to prison for years now, and at least the majority of people did. And with the anti-vigilante law being set into motion in season 6, I mean, it wasn't, so they added something to a Supermax, because otherwise he'd just break out like he did before. Another opinion was said by someone else in the server: season 7 is by far my personal favorite season of the show. Mia is awesome. The Black Siren and Black Canary arc is awesome. I can't help but like Emiko, even if she's bad, and I just It's just so yes. And I did like Emiko. I think the casting was great on her part, especially the flashbacks for Emiko when we're learning more about her. And the scenes between Renee and her and Alvar and Emiko, and talking about Thea a little bit here and there, and Alvar training her. I think all those scenes were amazing for this season, which is why it's so good, because we did get that. But yeah, thank you for those who send in opinions. I appreciate it. So again, if you want to be a part of the podcast, the more podcast responses we get, the longer the episode will be. At least the back half of the episode will be. So, we get more responses, the longer the episode will be. So yeah. So send in your responses for Arrow Season 8. Should be up by the time you guys are seeing this. Should have been up for the past 24 hours by now. So hopefully that's up and going. I'd hope so. And yeah. So thank you for watching. Have a good day. Have a good night. Subscribe. Like if you're new. Share it. Comment down below whatever you want to say. And if you disagree, or leave your own opinions down below of the podcast, what you thought of it, or the Arrow Season 7 if you really wanted to. Turn notifications on. And I'll see you guys next week. For Arrow Season 8, episode 8 of the podcast. We'll be concluding the Arrow arc of the podcast. It's gonna be something. Probably gonna cry. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.